Good morning. This video is to compensate for the lecture of Sunday, March the 15th. Today we are going to discuss two issues that are related to the British political system, which represent very important current issues taking place right now. The first one is the Scottish question of independence, and the second one is Brexit. In terms of the idea of Scottish independence, Scotland used to be an independent country until 1707. From 1603 to 1707, there was some form of personal union between three parts of the UK: Ireland, England, and Scotland. These three parts of the UK used to have one king from 1603 to 1707, but constitutionally speaking, they used to represent three different states, and each one of them had its own parliament. Each one of them had its own laws and regulations, its own courts, and so on, but with the exception that the king used to put three crowns on his head. The first king to play these three roles was King James the Sixth of Scotland. He became, due to some family relationships, he became the King of England in 1603. So he put the crowns of England, Scotland, as well as Ireland on his head. This remained the case for 100 years, from 1603 to 1707. In 1707, the parliaments of England and Scotland took the decision to declare a constitutional unity between the two parts of the UK, and from that time on, the country became known as the United Kingdom of Great Britain. But it was not until the 19th century, in 1801, that all the three parts, or rather the four parts of the UK, became one constitutional entity in the form of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. What we are interested in now is how the people reacted to that constitutional unity between England and Scotland. Of course, we can imagine that not all the people of Scotland liked the idea of union with England, especially that the position or the status of Scotland was inferior to that of England. It was the case that England controlled Scotland, not the other way around. The Scottish National Party was formed in the year 1934, and from its time of inception or creation, it advocated for Scottish independence. That party used to be a relatively weak political party on the political stage before 1974. Yes, it existed and it called for the independence of Scotland, but for these long years it did not manage to put or to elect members of the House of Commons from its ranks. But it was only in the year 1974 that the party managed for the first time to elect some of its ranks as members of the House of Commons. Why was it the case that it was only in 1974 that the party managed to elect some members of the House of Commons? It was the case for two reasons. The first reason was the discovery of oil off the shores of Scotland in the North Sea in the 1960s. This discovery gave a push to the Scottish people to ask for independence, because they thought that it was their right to enjoy more of the benefits of the oil that was discovered next to their shores. This was the first reason why they elected members finally to the House of Commons from the Scottish National Party in the year 1974, in order to advocate for these demands that were legitimate from their points of view. Number two, in the early 1970s, under the government of Edward Heath, and he was a Conservative Prime Minister, he started to steer away from the policies of the welfare state and from the collectivist consensus that used to exist during the 1950s and the 1960s, because the economy started to crumble, started to suffer from the heavy demands and from financing the welfare services and trying to achieve full employment. And the people of Scotland did not like the idea of the state giving up on its social role, did not like the idea of the state relinquishing the provision of social services to the people. So they started to elect members from a local party, from a party of their own, in order to advocate for these concerns in the House of Commons. So that was the reason why, specifically in the year 1974, that the party managed for the first time to elect some of its ranks as members of parliament. There was another important milestone on the road for independence for Scotland in the 1990s. In 1997, as we all know, Tony Blair became Prime Minister. His Labour Party managed to win a landslide victory in 1997, and as soon as he became Prime Minister, he embarked on a program of devolution. He devolved power to other parts of the United Kingdom, or to different parts of the United Kingdom. He created an assembly in Wales, and he restored the Parliament of Northern Ireland, that is called the Stormont Parliament, and he opened for the first time a parliament in Scotland. And that was the first time Scotland had a working parliament in over 3 centuries. From 1707 until 1997, Scotland did not have a parliament of its own. From 1998 to 2007, Scotland was governed by a number of coalition governments that were made up of Labour and the Liberal Democrats. It has always been the case that the Labour Party has been more open to the demands of the Scottish people for home rule and for having independence and so on. So all the governments that used to govern Scotland for the first 10 years after the opening of the Parliament, from 1998 to 2007, were from the Labour Party in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. But in 2007 there was a local election for the Parliament of Scotland that is called the Holy Road Parliament, and that is composed of 129 seats. And that year was very decisive for the path of the SNP, because it managed to win a plurality of the seats of the Parliament, and thus the party was able to form a minority government, because it was the largest party in the Holy Road Parliament at that time. So that was the first government that the Scottish National Party managed to form on its own, though it was a minority government. In 2011, things changed for the benefit of the Scottish National Party, as it managed to get the majority of seats in the legislative election that took place in the province in that year. It returned to the plurality status in the 2016 election, and this is currently the case. The government of Scotland is a government of the Scottish National Party, and it is led by a female politician who's called Nicola Sturgeon, who assumed the leadership of the party in 2014. In 2014, the leader of the National Party of Scotland negotiated the holding of an independence referendum with David Cameron's Conservative government, and they reached a deal, and according to this deal, the youth who were aged 16 and 17 would have or would be entitled to vote. It is well known that the voting age of the people in the United Kingdom is 18 years old, but because the youth supported the idea of the separation between Scotland and the United Kingdom. It was a demand by the Scottish National Party from the Conservative government of David Cameron that voters as young as 16 and 17 would be granted the vote. And David Cameron accepted these conditions, and the deal and the referendum was run. And luckily for the United Kingdom, a majority of the people objected to the independence of Scotland. 56% of the people, of the electorate in Scotland, said no, we don't want Scotland to be separated from the United Kingdom, and 44% said that they wanted so. And because the party lost the referendum in 2014, the leader of the party, his name was Alex Salmond, he had to tender his resignation, and another leader was elected, the current leader of the Scottish National Party, and her name is Nicola Sturgeon. She is very well known. She has always asked for the organization of another independence referendum in the region, in Scotland, but it is the case that the Conservative government of Theresa May and of Boris Johnson refuse categorically the holding or the organization of another referendum of independence in the region or in the province, because they say that it must be some years before they finally take this decision. Why did the people refuse the independence of Scotland in the referendum of 2014? There are multiple reasons, but the most important of these reasons are economic ones as well as military ones. Number one, Scotland does not have a military of its own. You can say that Scotland lacks the cornerstones of an independent country, an independent state. It does not have a military of its own. It does not have an economy that can be separated from the United Kingdom. The economy of Scotland and the United Kingdom, the economies of both entities are intertwined. They are very much related to each other. A lot of people travel each day between Scotland and Northern Ireland. A lot of Scottish people work in England. A lot of people work and live in England. You might be surprised to even know that the region, Scotland, the province, provided two UK Prime Ministers. One of them is very famous, Tony Blair. Tony Blair is a Scots, and Gordon Brown, the politician who succeeded Tony Blair in the leadership of the Labour Party, is also a Scot. This means that there are very intertwined relationships between the two parts, England and Scotland, and it is very, very difficult to separate the two parts. Scotland voted thus to remain in the United Kingdom in the referendum that was held in 2014. There was another important milestone on the path of Scottish independence that took place in the referendum on British membership in the EU that was held in 2016. We all know that there was a Brexit referendum in 2016 that was called for by the government of David Cameron. David Cameron, as we are going to know when we discuss the issue of Brexit, reached a deal with the European Union, and he put this deal in front of the people in a national referendum, and he said that if the people refuse this deal, this means that they are going to get out of the EU. But the thing that happened, which was very puzzling, was that most of the Scottish electorate voted to remain part of the EU. About 2/3 of the people in Scotland said that they want the UK to remain as a member of the EU, and they do not want the UK to get out of the bloc. The same percentage took place in Northern Ireland as well. And just upon the declaration of the results of the referendum, Nicola Sturgeon, the First Minister of the government of Scotland, declared that she is pressing for another referendum to take place over the independence of Scotland, because she says that England is not going to take us out of the European Union against our will. We want to stay as members of the European Union. We don't want to leave the bloc. We can have a future of our own. That's why that was a very important and decisive moment in the history of Scotland, and it remains to be seen whether Scotland is going to get its independence from the United Kingdom or not. Another point is that in the elections of December 2019, the UK legislative elections, the elections of the House of Commons, the SNP won 48 seats, up from 35 in the elections of 2017. In the elections of 2015 to the House of Commons, the SNP won 56 seats. We might be astonished to know that all the seats that are allocated to Scotland in the House of Commons are 59 seats. So the SNP in the elections of 2015 managed to get the overwhelming majority of the seats for the province in the House of Commons. This means that it had a very strong mandate from the people. But the representation of the Scottish National Party in the elections of 2017 decreased to 35 seats, but it then increased to 48 seats in the elections of 2019. In all three consecutive elections, the party managed to replace the Liberal Democratic Party as the third largest bloc in Parliament, the third largest party delegation in Parliament after the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. Before that, the Liberal Democratic Party used to be called the third largest party. But this has changed since 2015, which is also very important for the Scottish National Party. And nowadays the party plays the role of the opposition inside Parliament against the government of Theresa May, and afterwards against the government of Boris Johnson, and it always makes problems in Parliament and makes problems for the government and in Parliament, and it always poses questions to the Prime Minister, questions with the intention of embarrassing the government and so on, and they stick to their opinion that they want one day to have a referendum of independence in the province. Is it going to be the case that the province is going to have its independence from the UK one day or not? This remains to be seen. It is also quite important to mention that the three largest parties in the United Kingdom, the Conservatives, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democratic Party, all of them support the constitutional unity of the country. In the referendum of 2014, the politicians of the three parties campaigned for Scotland to remain part of the United Kingdom, and they tried to convince the electorate in Scotland to vote for Scotland to remain as a member of the United Kingdom, as part of the United Kingdom. And they said, David Cameron especially said, if the people of Scotland chose to remain part of the United Kingdom, we are going to give a lot of concessions to the province. We are going to give them a lot of rights on the path of home rule or in the area of home rule, but we are not going to give the region or to give the province full-fledged independence. This is the story of independence of Scotland, and we are going to see what is going to happen in the future. This is the end of part 1 of the lecture. Thank you so much, and we are going to return after a break.